Welcome back. As we mentioned, the Trump transition team is making a concerted effort to get his cabinet picks across the finish line. The president-elect has been working the phones, according to sources familiar with the push. And yesterday in Texas, Trump was also with some Senate Republicans to watch the SpaceX test launch. Among them was Republican Senator from North Dakota, Kevin Cramer, who joins me now. So thank you so much, Senator, for being here. So you've talked to President-elect Trump about his desire to see Matt Gaetz confirmed as Attorney General. And you were also with Trump in Texas just yesterday. So what can you tell us about your conversations with the President-elect?
Well, first of all, we've been together for many hours. The last, obviously yesterday, and then over the weekend talked quite a while. And the issue of Matt Gaetz was not the prominent issue of the day, and it wasn't even a long discussion, other than him just expressing his desire to see Matt confirmed, and he really hopes that that's what happens. But I have to say, I didn't feel like there was a full court press of any type. He doesn't need to reiterate to me how important this is to him. I mean, after all, he is carrying out what he promised the people he would do.
And I know you said Matt Gaetz wasn't a big topic, but you have said yourself that Matt Gaetz, quote, destroyed the House of Representatives for several months, and that Gaetz has a, quote, steep hill to climb to get your vote. You also questioned whether it's worth Trump's political capital to get Matt Gaetz confirmed. So did you share those concerns with the president-elect? And if so, what was his response?
I haven't, and I get the sense right now he's going through a normal process where he's doing some personal lobbying. Obviously, J.D. Vance is helping him. Matt himself is reaching out. I mean, he called me and left a voicemail. I called him back. We haven't been able to connect yet. He's going through the normal channels and not spending so much capital as just spending some time on the effort. And I think it's really clear, and it's an important distinction, that he does want Matt Gaetz confirmed. This isn't a diversion of some sort or a distraction from other controversial picks, because I don't think they're all that controversial. But he clearly knows what he wants, and he's put that forward. And I don't think he feels yet like he's spending a lot of capital.
And I have to ask you, I know you say that the president-elect isn't feeling like he's spending a lot of capital, but I wonder if you yourself determine that Matt Gaetz is unqualified to be Attorney General, do you think yourself that you are willing to go toe-to-toe with President-elect Trump on this issue, and maybe even other Senate Republicans?
Well, it's an important part of the process. When the president's party is the majority party in the Senate, and they're going to have the final say on this confirmation, obviously part of the path involves personal conversations, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's entirely to be expected. I don't expect there will be a big public brawl of any type. I actually think that he's going to measure and weigh every decision he has to make from now until we begin this process of confirming. And frankly, yesterday, most of the time, we discussed prospective cabinet secretaries. I mean, he had some announcements yesterday and some teases yesterday. Dr. Oz, of course, we talked about that. We talked about the possibility of a new FBI director.
But, Senator, I just want to ask, for you specifically, if you determine that Matt Gaetz isn't qualified, would you vote against Matt Gaetz if Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, was saying, I think that you shouldn't do that? Would you be willing to do that? So
my vote, my vote is my vote. And I think back to when I voted to override his veto of a National Defense Authorization Act, and we prevailed. Senators don't give up their votes easily. At the very least, there's transactions that take place. That's entirely appropriate. So I'm not going to say what I'll never do, nor am I going to say what I'll definitely do in this case, because there's a process, and the process involves background checks, and it may involve release of the House Ethics Committee, or it may not. I don't know, but there'll certainly be background checks, testimony, a hearing in the Judiciary Committee that I'm not a member of, and after that, then we'll go to the next level, and we'll see what happens.
Well, you bring up the House Ethics Committee. It is meeting today, or did meet today. You said the committee should release its report on Matt Gaetz. Speaker Johnson disagrees. So what should the Senate do if the committee keeps this private, and how hard is the Senate willing to fight to see this report? And specifically, how hard are maybe you willing to fight to see this report?
Sure. Well, I'm not worried about seeing the report. I think the easy thing to do and the appropriate thing to do would be for them to release it, at least to start with the Judiciary Committee, who has the opportunity to review it. But if they don't release it, then I think it'll be repeated. I mean, the Judiciary Committee has a lot of power itself, and has investigators and has subpoena power. They'll have hearings, they can have witnesses. All of the same things that created the House Ethics Report can be recreated. And so I think that's likely, at least to some degree. And I don't think anybody's just going to cast a vote without looking into the background. These are serious allegations. None of them have, by the way, have gotten him convicted. In fact, the FBI just stopped their investigation altogether. So it's not like he's been convicted of anything. Nobody should be surprised that Matt Gaetz is a maverick, that he is he's strong, that he has, some people might even say reckless at times. But that is what Donald Trump wanted, and what he wants is what he campaigned on. He's fulfilling that promise. As per my vote, that will be determined later, once we've gone through the committee process. And we owe it to Matt, we owe it to the president, we owe it to the American people to have that process play out.
I want to also ask you about Big Hegseth. You're on the Senate Armed Services Committee, where Big Hegseth will appear before his confirmation. He said that women should not have combat roles in the military. As you know, the military roles opened all combat roles to women in 2016, and they found success, including the thousands of women who saw combat in Iraq and Afghanistan and earned Valor Awards. Are you comfortable with that position by Pete Hegseth?
Well, first of all, if that's his position, that's his personal position. He certainly earned the right to have it, at being an American, and even more so being an American warrior as he's been. So I don't find that as controversial as some people may. That may not be the military's position, even if Pete Hegseth is confirmed as the secretary. I at this point see no reason why he wouldn't be. He is a warrior's warrior. I think he will represent the enlisted man and woman, and certainly he'll have something to say about the people that are around him. But he's a great face, frankly, for a modern American military. He oozes peace through strength, and that's exactly what Donald Trump wants. And I don't, at this point, I see no reason not to support Pete Hegseth, and I intend to do everything I can to help him get across the finish line.
And I know you said that you're willing to do what it takes to get across the finish line. A U.S. military official, though, told NBC News that Hegseth showed, quote, zero leadership capability during his service with the D.C. National Guard, and that he, quote, had his own agenda. He didn't care what the rules were. So are you comfortable with someone like that leading our men and women in uniform?
Well, first of all, one military official from the D.C. National Guard is not who I turn to for my counsel. I will look forward to visiting with Pete. I know him a little bit. We're going to have a meeting. I look forward to discussing things with him, things that I agree with, things I disagree with that he has said, particularly about generals and forming a commission and all of those things to root out the woke generals. I think what we need is somebody who elevates the military and elevates service and elevates the aspirations of young officers who would like to someday be a general. And I think, for the most part, generals salute to the political leadership. I remember not so long ago when Gina Ortiz was the Undersecretary of the Air Force. She drove a lot of Air Force generals out of the service because they wouldn't be woke, because they wouldn't read her DEI report out loud. So all of these are issues that matter, but collectively you have to come up with eventually a binary decision of a yes or no. And at this point, everything I see about Pete Hegseth is that he'd be a very fine Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, well, I hear that clearly from you, Senator. Well, thank you so much, Senator Kevin Cramer, for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.